But the one that we are going to go really in-depth out of the gate on is the 10 preseason storylines I'm buying. A perfect time to react to these. So, Barry, I'll start with number 1. Darren Waller will be the focal point of Brian Daboll's passing game.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen this in the preseason, just being peppered with targets. We've talked about him a lot. Darren Waller, of course, on my love list as well. So you can argue that maybe I'm just confirming my priors. But the fact is that he is healthy. He is motivated. He is a perfect fit in terms of the crossing routes that he runs. He's a perfect fit for the kind of offense that Daboll likes to run. You think about how many targets Daboll used to send to the slot to like Cole Beasley in Buffalo. And now he's got a big, fast guy who's a total mismatch in Darren Waller. Also, look at what Daniel Jones does really well. He throws between the numbers. And so I think that Darren Waller is on the short list of players, of tight ends that could lead their team in targets, receiving yards, and receptions. Kelce is one of them. Andrews is one of them. And Darren Waller is one of them as well. I think outside of Kelce, he's got top 2 fantasy tight end upside. That's within the range of outcomes if Waller stays healthy this year.
Yeah, you've consistently ranked him over George Kittle throughout this summer. Jay, are you buying in on Waller's fit with the Giants?
I think so, and he's someone whose ADP is surging, and people are really buying in. I mean, that drive didn't help in the preseason.
3 targets.
Yeah, exactly. But with Waller, last time he was healthy and played a full season in 2020, he finished as tight end 2. So he clearly has that upside. And the other thing with Waller is that he's 30 years old, he's about to turn 31, but he's only played 74 games in the NFL. He hasn't had that much wear and tear because of the turmoil early on in his career. So I think that Waller and Andrews, I think those 2 guys can be closer to Travis Kelce, and I'd rather at cost have Waller or Andrews than spend a really high early pick on Travis Kelce.
Jay, how about number 2 here? Because I remember how high you were on Lamar Jackson going into last year, and now there's even more optimism this year because of Todd Monken's hiring. Number 2 is Lamar Jackson will return to MVP form in Todd Monken's high-octane offense. We know the new weapons they put around him. They invested a first-round pick in Zay Flowers. They gave Odell Beckham a lot of money on a 1-year deal, and everything's pointing up after Lamar got paid.
Yeah, and with Lamar, I find it so hard to just shake the prior of the 2019 season still I keep on expecting that guy and that kind of performance to come back when he won MVP unanimously. And then in 2020, 21, he was banged up, but he also just wasn't as good as he was in 2019, and maybe the league adjusted. But last year when he was healthy, he was starting to get back to that level. He was in the MVP mix, and I think that, if they are going to air it out more, that's only going to help him. He is, I mean, it's silly to say about Lamar Jackson because everyone says it, but he is an underrated passer. He's an excellent passer to complement, obviously, the dynamism on the ground. So yeah, it's very much within the realms of possibilities that Lamar Jackson is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy.
Barry, you align with that? You think Lamar can make a significant run, even over Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and a lot of it's just kind of health related?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like that's a preseason storyline I'm buying into. I'm buying into the revamped Ravens high-octane offense under Todd Monken. Look, here's what I'll tell you. I have Lamar Jackson at 4. He made my love list. But if you told me, Connor, you're like, hey, Barry, here's one thing I can tell you. I can look into my crystal ball, and I'm going to assure you, Lamar Jackson is playing all 17 games this year. He's not getting hurt. If you told me that, he'd be my number 1 ranked quarterback in fantasy. Literally, only knock on Lamar Jackson, who last year, in a down year, still had over 700 yards rushing, still was a top 6 quarterback on a points per game basis. That was last year where he got hurt. He didn't have nearly the offensive play calling around him or the weapons around him. Like he was doing it with like Devin Duvernay, right? And Demarcus Robinson and guys like that. And so, my only concern on Lamar is health because obviously he's missed a significant amount of time the last couple of years. But if you told me 17 games, he's the number 1 quarterback in fantasy, no question.
All right, Barry, number 3, which I'm a fan of here, and we got a taste of in the last preseason game, but we've gotten a taste of it since Aaron Rodgers arrived at Florham Park. With Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, Garrett Wilson will have a monster breakout season, becoming the new Davante Adams.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen the hard knocks. We've seen the quotes about, literally Aaron Rodgers calling him Davante Adams. Connor, you cover that team really well. You do a great job for it. Over at SNY. You tell me, am I insane on this one? But I just think Garrett Wilson, I have Garrett Wilson as a top 10 wide receiver, and I feel very confident in that. This is a guy who had over 17 points with with Joe Flacco and Mike White. And now he gets Aaron Rodgers, who's going to do everything in his power, I think, to make Garrett Wilson have a monster season.
I'm with you all the way. You see the 147 targets on the screen. Corey Davis retires. Now you have a better quarterback, a team that will be able to throw when they want to. That number will go up. He should get 170, 175 targets this year. I think he's a bigger presence in the red zone with Rodgers. We saw them check out of a run play in the red zone and throw him the fade. So, Jay, I mean, it's hard not to buy into Garrett Wilson because of the carousel he dealt with at this position last year and still won Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and I think one of the sneaky things about last season was just how desperate Jets fans were for Mike White to get healthy because they were
clamoring for it.
Because of how bad Flacco, who just could not move by the end, and Zach Wilson, obviously, how bad they were. I mean, Cris got in there at some point as well, and Wilson was still able to put up those 1,100 yards. And now you get Rodgers, and Rodgers last year, he wasn't close to the MVP of 2020 and 2021, but I wonder how much was that he was just at the end of his time with Green Bay, he didn't have a Garrett Wilson type of receiver, and also he was injured. And so I think that just the leap that Wilson is going to get going from those 4 quarterbacks last year to Rodgers, that's as big of a leap as anyone's going to get in terms of guys feeding them the ball.
That takes us to number 4, which includes another second-year player, and this one is Dameon Pierce will dominate touches in the Houston's backfield and catch 40-plus passes while running behind a better-than-you-think offensive line, Jay.
Yeah, I like that. I think Dameon Pierce is one of the best pure runners in football. I mean, just look at this. Just the way that he runs angry. I always think about how he dominated the Philadelphia Eagles in primetime last year. They had no answer for him. And his stats are skewed by just these random games last year where against Miami, he had 5 carries for 8 yards. The week before against Washington, 10 carries for 8 yards. And the Texans were so bad last year that he just found himself in these game states where he just had no chance to produce. And so I think the offense will be better. I think the team will be better overall. And I think that, he can be a guy who is, consistently getting close to 20 carries a game and being efficient and getting a little bit more work in the receiving game. I mean, you can probably speak to that better than I can, Connor. What's his upside as a pass catcher?
He's got good hands, and he's got it, once again, came out of college and is a great pass protector. So that gets you on the field in those roles. And Jay, we showed right there what he can do in space with the ball. He's just so difficult to tackle. Not to get crazy, but we always talk about on this show how great of a pure runner that Nick Chubb is. Dameon Pierce has that same style where it's upper body power, it's lower body power, and it's just pure determination. I mean, there was a play in college where they knocked his helmet off, and he kept running through people. So, Barry, this is a really fun one because Pierce, for some reason, has been slightly overlooked this summer. I think we were puzzled by his ADP a couple weeks ago. So I think Jay and I are completely aligning with you that he should have a monster year for the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's on my love list. And we had a draft. We had our show draft yesterday, and all you animals snaked me a ton. But I was able to get Dameon Pierce at least in that league. And like he's definitely one of my guys. He's one of my most rostered players this year. Dwayne McFarland, my friend Dwayne McFarland, who does a great job over at fantasylife.com, he writes something called the utilization report. And so he did a preseason utilization report. And this is per Dwayne. He's played 7 drives with CJ Stroud, right? The first team offense. In the preseason, Dameon Pierce has played 7 drives with CJ Stroud this preseason. In those drives, Pierce has logged 83% of the snaps, 83% of the rushing attempts, and had a 67% route participation. Those are like eye-popping numbers. Those are elite usage numbers when you compare them with other well-known pass-catching running backs, seeing 67% route participation. The anti-Dameon Pierce argument is like, oh, he's going to come off the field for Devin Singletary in third down. Oh, he's not that good. Oh, the Texans are brutal, so they're going to be down and throwing a lot. Well, again, that 67% route participation, yes, it's all small sample size, but this is what they're doing with their starting offense in the preseason, and that's what we expect this year with a new coaching staff in place. That means that he's not leaving the field on third down. To your point, Connor, it's within his skill set that came out of college, and so Devin Singletary, who, by the way, if you look at the numbers, isn't that good of a pass catcher, actually. He has not been great at that in the pros. I think Devin Singletary is more depth than kind of a 1A, a 1B to his 1A. My expectation here is Pierce gets at least 70% of the running back touches, maybe 75%. He doesn't come off the field. The Texans' offensive line, I think, is better than people give it credit for. So, yeah, I'm in on Dameon Pierce. I'm his running back 13. I'm buying this preseason usage that a true bell cow season is coming. or Pierce a potential RB1 season, but not at RB1 prices.
The fifth preseason storyline that you're buying, Barry, that the Steelers offense will take a nice step forward this year with Kenny Pickett being a nice late-round quarterback sleeper, and that Jaylen Warren will be a much bigger part of the offense at the expense of Najee Harris.
Yeah, Najee Harris is somebody that Jay Croucher took in our show draft. I was so glad that he took that.
Took him in the 6th round.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I can't wait till Jaylen Warren takes this job over. Look, there's been 5 preseason drives that the first-team offense has played. In those 5 drives, Kenny Pickett, 13 for 15, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns. Warren has candidly looked more explosive. And I think the most interesting thing here is that he's starting to play a little bit on first down. Look, we know Jaylen Warren's going to be the third down guy. But what happened a few times in the preseason is that he would stay on the field for third down, he would convert the third down, and then he would get run on first and second down. And so if you're telling me, call it a third of the early down work, that 2/3 of the early down work goes to Najee Harris and a third of the early down work goes to Jaylen Warren, and then all the passing down work goes to Jaylen Warren, I much prefer Jaylen Warren at cost to Najee Harris than Najee Harris this year. And I'm a big believer in the entire offense. Like, I could have thrown in Deontay Johnson or George Pickens here, Pat Freiermuth, who Jay did get, and I like Freiermuth this year. I just think that entire offense takes a big step forward. Kenny Pickett has looked fantastic this preseason. Everyone talks about how the Lions ended the season last year. No one talks about the Steelers going 7-2 down the stretch last year. We talked about this the other day, last week on the show with Drew Dinsick, and totally agree with this, that Mike Tomlin is a great bet for Coach of the Year.
Yep, Mike Tomlin in the 25-1 range for Coach of the Year, which is way too big when you consider that the Steelers are like plus 450 to win the division. If they win that division, which might be the best division in football, Mike Tomlin, who has never won Coach of the Year, is going to get a ton of credit there. I think that should be more like 12-1 for Coach of the Year. With Najee Harris, to borrow Matthew's phrase, I'm buying the dip on Najee Harris, where people are starting to treat him like he's Kenyon Drake. Like, Najee Harris is good. He was a high draft pick for a reason. He's still going to get the first crack at that role. I think this offense is just going to be better overall. Yes, Jaylen Warren is going to eat into his time, but I still think, I mean, this is 2 drafts in a row now where I've got him in the late 5th, early 6th round. Like, that is too late for Najee Harris. And yeah, I'm buying this offense overall. Loved what Pickett showed toward the end of the season. I mean, Connor, you know this as well as anyone. Like, he was thrown into the fire last year where he had to face the Jets and the Bills as his first 2 games, and then he really grew into the season. I think back to those game-winning drives that he led against Vegas, against Baltimore in primetime, looked the part. Offensive line will be better. Pickens, wide receiver 2 in year 2. I think that he's going to have a big year too. So there is a basis for success for Kenny Pickett this year.
All right, number 6 here, Jay. Luke Musgrave is the real deal and will be a viable mid-tier tight end 2 with legit tight end 1 upside. We've talked a lot how, sure, there's Christian Watson there, and maybe Romeo Doubs has a nice year too, and we know they have the 2 running backs. But Green Bay's offense, especially the reps with the starters that Musgrave has seen this summer, he feels like one of those tight end finds, and he's been this way for Barry. Barry slowly moved him up the ranks. One of those tight end finds that you're just hoping the target share can really help him.
Yeah, and I think just conceptually, you want to take flyers in situations where there's a lot of uncertainty. For instance, I think like the Bengals have a pretty certain situation with their top 2 wide receivers and Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow. Green Bay, we have no idea what that team is going to be. Right. Christian Watson is the number 1 wide receiver, but outside of that, I mean, there is just a ton of uncertainty, and uncertainty creates upside, and I think Luke Musgrave, particularly at the tight end position, he can capture some of that.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.